There we go. Can everybody see that okay?
Looks great.
All right. Okay, so I'm gonna just kind of move this over a little bit here. Okay. All right, so beyond anatomy, creating creaturely characters that we can really believe in. And we want to do that because when we're watching a movie, we don't want to be distracted by thinking, gee, that's a really weird animal. That looks wrong. Otherwise, it detracts from the story, and that's not a good thing. All right. Get back on the right window. Okay, so we want to talk about duality. Let me go back one slide because I accidentally did that. Okay, so duality is the sum of animal and human personality through observation. That means as artists or scientists, we observe real animals and observe how they behave and move and do their stuff, and people as well. And we fuse that into one design body to fulfill its role in the world and story. We're basically creating an actor. And see, sorry about that, keep switching. All right, and so I just kind of have repeated myself, but the goal is to achieve a fully integrated character, which reflects real life, no matter how aesthetically stylized. And so you can have some very realistic looking creatures like in Star Wars or Star Trek. And then you have some really funny looking creatures like, or animals that you might see, for example, in Pixar productions like Up and The Incredibles, all that sort of thing. And I have to go back here. All right, here we go. So we start with what we know. And I'm going to demonstrate how to create a satyr. And most of us as human beings and artists, we are familiar with ourselves. And so here is like a basic figure you might draw in life drawing class. And then here is a nanny goat, a Nubian goat. And I've just broken down the basic anatomical structures. So we have the human and we have a goat here, and we're going to create a satyr, which in classic Greco-Roman mythology is basically half person, half human being, and half goat. But I don't want to create a chimera. I want to create a hybrid that has its own biology. And so let's go see what the result of that will be. And I want to add in a bit of humor. So here we go. So you can see that this creature is not half human, half goat, but it's a blend of the genetics in between that. And also I've added some accessories, like here's, we can probably tell that this creature is really happy going wine tasting and having more than one taste. And there's a bit of humor in its face, and there's a bit of human expression, with a smile and such, and somewhat vaguely human arms, but then we have some goat-like legs and the horns and all of that. So that is an exercise in creating a satyr that might appear in an animated feature and that we can look at and laugh at and relate to. And that's the key. So we can go on and do another take on this. And so here's some of my sketches from zoos, various primates. On one half of this page, we've got apes. These are bonobos from the San Diego Zoo. And then on this side are some monkeys. These are squirrel monkeys. And I just love little squirrel monkeys because they look like Eddie Munster, and I just love to draw them. So let's go ahead on. Oops, sorry. For some reason, I'm having to double click on this, and I'm not used to doing that. So let's try it again. Here we go. So here is some anatomy studies of, in this case, this is a Ganon monkey. Things like this I did when I was working on films like Jumanji. They are so anatomically conscious because they're wanting to create very, very realistic characters. And so all kinds of art like this is very useful to the production team that actually has to model and rig a digital character. All right, we'll just go here. Here are some studies similarly of a chimpanzee. The surface anatomy, here's the basic surface musculature, here's the underlying skeleton. And let's go ahead and create a satyr that lives in a tree that has a lot of chimpanzee characteristics as well as ibex or goat characteristics. And then we might get something like this. And I went over the top with the ibex horns, and we can see that there's bits of goat in the face, but there's still chimpanzee, and there's a combination of those two animals. And so let's go ahead and put it in a natural background in a tree. And so this is a science fiction style satyr as opposed to, say, a fantasy satyr, which would be more along the lines of a classical chimera that I referenced before. And I made up these birds kind of influenced by both hornbills and Archaeopteryx, or Archaeopteryx, from those who may not know, were one of the first earliest true birds in the fossil record. All right, so let's go and talk a little bit about Star Wars. One of the things that I did for the special edition, the remastered version of episode, let's see, 6, where we get into Jabba's palace, were to invent more dancing girls for that scene. This one's basically a costume. However, this is a digital character, this little fan dancer. And here are huts for the Phantom Menace. These are Jabba the Hutt's parents. This is Frank the Hutt, spelled with 2 Ks at the end. This is Gardula the Huttess. This is just a baby Jabba because I couldn't resist doing baby Jabba. So the interesting thing is that this particular Hutt is a little bit more wrinkled and such than Jabba the Hutt. He's older, and this is his mother. And the interesting thing about her is that they are references to Princess Leia's costume, and we won't get into that because I think Jabba the Hutt had some issues there. All right, for another client, I was asked to design a character that could be even possibly more repulsive than the Hutts from Star Wars. And so this was the result. This is Orem the Ogbog, and he is not a very nice person. But influences from Orem were the neck frills of ceratopsian dinosaurs, groupers, cane toads, all kind of inspired this rather ogreish creature, and of course, human personality. All right, I'll just click on that. That seems to work better. So here are some of the exploratory sketches I did of Orem. And Orem has a consort. Orem has a queen. She's actually the ruler and dominatrix of the entire species, which is a rather hive-like community. They want to basically take over the world. So this is Demissa. That's Orem and Demissa, who's actually the boss of Orem. And Demissa has hardly any redeeming qualities, except save one. She has a little pet. This is her little pet, who is an adorable, adorable little pet. She loves him so much, and she keeps him in a little box, and she plays with it, and it's like her little kitten. However, this very darling little character is actually the most poisonous creature on the planet. Let me show you another illustration of Demissa so you can see her in her full glory. And there she is. And she is constantly, like a queen bee, giving birth. And how she does it is, those of you who are familiar with Suriname toads, the young burst out of the skin of the mother when they are fully formed. It doesn't hurt either the toad or, in this case, Demissa. And you can kind of see these little baby bugs about ready to burst. And that's just the way of life for her. And she was, of course, inspired again by the ceratopsian and the cane toads, and also the Suriname toads or Suriname frogs, and deep sea groupers, and all kinds of fun, very real life creatures. In addition to the animation, I also designed some adult coloring books for this, and I will show you an illustration from those. And by their nature, adult coloring books are very elaborate. And here is, I added some colors so you can see them. Here is Orem and here is Domissa. These are creatures inspired by many different natural life animals that live on our planet today, but they are doing very human-like things. And that's where that duality comes in. We have an animal body, even though this one's imaginary, but it's doing people things. And that adds the duality into a character that we can watch and relate to and either love, hate, or whatever in between. Here are some more designs from that coloring book. And these are predatory animals inspired by hyenas and other interesting animals. And a lot of what I also do, besides working for the entertainment industry, is I work with scientists, and I do a lot of wildlife and also paleontological reconstruction. And paleontology, by its very nature, is all about forensics, trying to figure out what ancient life looks like from its closest living relatives. And so in a way, paleo reconstruction is a sort of subset of creature design, but we're forced to consider anatomy in context to, well, our past history on this planet. So here is a reconstruction of a Diplocaulus. A Diplocaulus was a very interesting ancient amphibian from the Permian era, way, millions and millions and millions of years before the first dinosaur ever walked the planet. It's kind of a rotund, robustly built Lissa amphibian. Its closest relatives today, of course, are newts and salamanders. Fortunately, there are a lot of these animals preserved in the fossil record, and here is a reconstruction of the skeleton. And then using what the bone scars, which are the muscle scars on the bones, which we all have in our bodies, which form of attachments of insertion origin on the skeleton from the muscles. I used real life salamander anatomy to reconstruct this beast. And of course, the surface anatomy is based on living animals. There's no way I could know the actual color or the actual skin texture, but based on what we know about real life amphibians, this is my best guess. So here we have, for example, a red-spotted newt. I'm pretty familiar with these animals because I had them as pets as a child. Here is a Japanese hellbender, a very, very large, the largest of the salamanders, basically. Here is an axolotl. This is a salamander that never quite grows up, so it always retains its gills. And I used these and other related species to reconstruct, again, the Diplocaulus. Here is the Diplocaulus in the same pose, for example, as the red-spotted newt. Here it is from the front. Here it is from above. And the interesting thing about this particular salamander is that it is very wide as far as rib cage goes. And most of the ones we have today, living today, aren't as wide. Okay, so I have all this real stuff here, but that allows me to play So I can design an animated character that could be used for a Disney production, or I could go even farther and create something that might be used for a Japanese manga or anime production. But I can do that because I've done my homework and understand the anatomy of these creatures. And so based on that Diplocalus anatomy, I had another assignment. I decided to have some fun. I did a rather humorous character, went way over the top. If the Diplocalus had these horn-like structures, I made this one even bigger. And why not add another pair on the tail and give it this big overbite just to add some more humor to it. And then I can go ahead and put it into a scene. And here it is, and it's escaping from these panther-like and salamander hybrids, and here's its little friend. And this is the type of artwork that I would create in the development of a motion picture. And here is the same animal, but really stylized. This could be like in a Pixar production or a Warner Brothers production or a DreamWorks production. All kinds of possibilities, but it's the same creature. And of course, we all know from scientific studies that Tyrannosauruses played football and did all kinds of silly things, right? Well, these are just some studies for an idea I had several years ago when the first Avengers movies were coming out, and they were so popular. And I thought, that's a popular movie. Dinosaurs are popular. What would happen if I played with that idea a little bit? You might come up with like the Incredible Hulkosaurus, except the problem is that he still can't quite, as buff as he is, he still can't quite scratch his chin. Same problem that the Triceratops had, but this was something I designed. I designed some other characters from the Avengers as dinosaurs and just put them on the internet. It went viral. It was okay because it's basically like fan art, so that's fine. But I had fun with that. And this is what he looks like before the gamma rays hit him. This is Bruce Anoli, a meek little NASA scientist, and that's what happens. All right, so let's go ahead and continue. All right, some more scientific illustration. Here's a reconstruction of one of the species of Protoceratops. Here's the cub of Protoceratops. It's always fun to illustrate the juvenile forms next to the adults. And let's go ahead and do further. And here is that same animal, but on a greeting card. And here are some keyframes from animating a Triceratops. And of course, we know that they did not do this in real life, but because I had their anatomy under the belt, I could play with the anatomy and animate this particular very happy Triceratops. All right, so naturalism and anthropomorphism. One of the movies I worked on for Disney was Brother Bear. I worked at least a year and a half on that feature, so I had a lot to do with it. One of the things they did at the get-go is had me design about 50 different analyses, anatomy charts of bears, of Kodiak and grizzly bears. They're from realism, how they look on the surface, to taking the fur off so the animators could see the anatomy, and then dividing the fur into blocks so that they could animate that fur. So they could understand how the fur grew out of the body, how it laid on the body, because Brother Bear is a 2D animated feature, and so the fur must necessarily be animated in blocks. In a 3D production like Brave, Pixar's Brave, where you also have bear characters, the fur is animated by a very complex software. All right. Here are some of the drawings in development for Brother Bear. And you can see that this bear is pretty true to a real bear, except that his expression and his facial features with these little subtle eyebrows is getting rather anthropomorphized. And I'm going to the process that Disney uses commonly in their productions. So Disney usually goes from real to their more exaggerated characters, but they always go from realism to exaggeration. All right, some more of the conceptual artwork. Conversations between the bear and the doll sheep. And I didn't do too much, just a little bit in the faces. And now you can kind of start to see a Disney character emerge right here in the face. Look at the eyebrows and the little more slightly human eyes. A little break here. This is a sketch from a picture from one of my sketchbooks, loosely drawn pictures of ravens and pigeons and my field notes. And where I'm going with this is another character from Brother Bear. So because I had drawn ravens and other corvids and I had an understanding, I was able to play with that anatomy and start to give it a lot of anthropomorphism. In other words, this animal is doing a human behavior using human gestures, but still keeping a lot of the natural history and structure and the wings, because Brother Bear is, in essence, a very naturalistic movie, and the bears are meant to be fairly realistic, and all the other animals are fairly realistic as well. All right, the development of some of the other characters. Here's a ground squirrel, fairly realistic, but then here I'm playing. And here is the ground squirrel doing something that's very human. And the muskrat, of course, is doing something that's very human. And now I'm starting to get more exaggerated, more design, more editing in the character, more really Disney now. Very Disney, almost there to the film release at this point, as far as design of the characters. That's very Disney face. But still, we have the anatomy and the structure. I also did a lot of work on the Moose brothers in Brother Bear. I loved doing the moose. Moose are such awesome animals anyway. They're so Cenozoic, they're so Pleistocene. Like these, they look prehistoric even though they're living today. Okay, continued work on those two characters in context of the story. They're getting a little more exaggerated. And even more exaggerated. This is working with the script. And then here you can see this is pretty much film release at this point, where you can see the bears and their eyebrows and their very coy expressions doing very human things. And I did the same treatment for the other characters that appeared in that movie. Here's fairly realistic rendition of a caribou. Here's providing the animators the basic anatomy of the caribou. Here is the caribou as it appears in the movie. Okay, so here is The Catern Odyssey. This is my own book, which has just been republished, and I'm really happy about that. This is the conceptual work that I used to pitch the book to the publisher, which originally was Simon and Schuster. And lemurs really don't walk around carrying baskets, but the potential is there because they're intelligent animals and they have paws, prehensile hands like we do that can carry things. And so in a science fiction world, it's not a huge jump to imbue these animals with just a little bit more human cognizance so that they could build little houses of their own and create little villages that hang from the branches of gigantic baobab trees in the science fiction world of Keturah. Keturah is an Earth-like planet. There aren't any people, human beings on the planet. It's inhabited entirely by intelligent animals and any species that ever existed on planet Earth, both living now and prehistoric, live on that planet, and they interact. This is the main character. This is Katuk. And this is just a character study of him. He's feeling rather sad in this particular study illustration. Here is one of the more sinister characters. He's obviously an eye. He kind of is in the high religious caste of this particular story. Here are some more conceptual illustrations. Here's Katuk. Here is Katuk interacting with the colobus monkey who is wearing spectacles. Alrighty, and my favorite animal of all are equines, horses. I have 2 horses. I take dressage lessons, and I love anything that vaguely resembles a horse, including seahorses, my favorites. Here are some studies from zoos. Here's a little mountain zebra relaxing in the dirt. Here is a Asiatic wild ass. This is a study of a domestic horse that happens to be a little bit angry. And the reason is so I can create horse characters for the Keturan Odyssey. This is a quagga. Quagga is a type of zebra. In the wild, they were hunted to extinction in South Africa around the turn of the 20th century, which is very sad. They were hunted because they were so beautiful. They wanted the skins, which is crazy because these animals were easily domesticated and you could pull carriages with them. Happily, and this is the only animal that has truly been brought back from extinction with its DNA intact. These animals live today. And the reason that is because they were actually color variants of the Damara zebra of South Africa. And by using a careful breeding program, they're able to reconstruct the color patterns of this animal. And so this animal happily does live today. They're able to check the DNA with existing hides. It was the same DNA. And so that is the only animal that we've actually been able to bring back from extinction. So yay, you can look it up on the Quagga Project, go online. It's a fascinating, very fascinating. So I'm very happy about that. All right. Here is another illustration from the Keturan Odyssey. Here is Katuk and Sia, the mouse deer, resting underneath. Quiga, the quagga. Another view. This is the cover art. And here is, the text goes down here, but I wanted to show you the original file. This illustration is done in film aspect ratio, the same film ratio that you see in cinema and on your smart televisions. And because this book was designed in the same way a motion picture was designed. So if you have a copy of the book, you'll see that this book is feels like a movie when you go through it, when you read it. And that was intentional. It's a cinematic novel rather than a graphic novel. Graphic novels have word bubbles, but the cinematic novel doesn't. It's all in the composition, and then any other art that's in it is exactly the same sort of art that is designed as conceptual art for a motion picture. So it's a cinematic novel. Okay, we're going to go back to Star Wars and look at some contrast in character. All right, so here is Jar Jar Binks. He is a very happy, usually upbeat character. He does a lot of, makes a lot of mistakes. He doesn't intend to make mistakes, but it ends up getting a lot of people annoyed at him. But he's consistently cheerful, and his design expresses that. He's got a lot of roundness in his eyes. He's even some happy colors. But if we look at his antithesis, it would be Sebulba. Sebulba is a pod racer pilot who wants to win the races at any cost, no matter who is massacred or falls by the wayside in the process of it. So we can see he's very sour. Everything about him is kind of drippy, kind of snarly. And his inspiration, actually, his face, was a certain dromedary that lived at the Oakland, California Zoo. And so there's a lot of camel in this little guy. All right, so even within Gungans, the same species here, we can use color and a little bit of facial variation to delineate a character. Again, we have kind of this upbeat, happy-go-lucky character, and then we have a very world-weary character. This is Sergeant Tarkles, who is always exasperated with Jar Jar Binks. All right, here are some more Star Wars universe characters. These appeared on young adult book jackets when The Phantom Menace first came out afterwards. We have a kind of a noble slave character. We have a con artist character. We have an old princess character. And everything in their physiognomy is designed to kind of create a character and an emotion and a response from whoever sees these particular characters. And I'm hurrying and as I go through this. I've done design for a lot of video games, and a lot of times in video games, the budgets are fairly limited. And so you have to use kind of the same character construct and just do a little bit of variation in order to meet budgets. But you can do this via color and just accessories and just a few variants in the faces. For example, this is kind of a noble character. When you have blue and stuff, that often connotes nobility on a subconscious level, or purity or goodness. Here we have a warrior character. He's a little tougher. He's more like a tigery coloration, but sidekicks are always fun. They can have a little bit more color variations and patterns and a little more differences in the faces and such. And we can have kind of more evil characters or villain characters. We can have more humorous characters, just use the same basic physiognomy, but just maybe get the stomach a little bit fatter. And we can shrink things down and make a very short character. And you can put more of your budget then into a particular character that might have more of elaborate costuming, but still have the basic build. And so by color, by accessories, by attitude, I'm able to create from a limited palette, so to speak, design palette, a good variant of characters. These are, I call them cat people. They're kind of like weird felines. All right, aesthetics. Aesthetics means the look and feel or design, artistic design of a character. Okay, so back to natural history. Here is the anatomy of a female African leopard. This is her cub. And it's interesting to compare, as I mentioned before, with the Protoceratops, the similarities and differences between a juvenile of the same species and the adult. I find that fascinating. Here are some sketches of mine, sketchbook sketches of mine of a young cougar. This is the cougar's mother. This cougar is about a year old, and this is his mama. Here are some more of my notebook study sketches of cougars, and kind of just obviously paying special attention to the anatomy. This is a hairless domestic cat, a Sphinx cat, which is really interesting because it allows me to study the skin folds and wrinkles that normally appear under the fur of any normal cat. This is from Disney, again, Brother Bear. This cougar eventually was cut from the movie eventually, but it was fun designing him. He's doing kind of an alas, poor Yorick with some a character that he, I guess, ate in the past. All right, so here are two felines, nearly the same position, but very different uses. This is a greeting card. Happy birthday card, dandelion. This was an illustration done for a paleontological magazine, Aeon magazine. This is Smilodon from the La Brea tar pits in Southern California, Smilodon fatalis more specifically. And not only did I have to reconstruct the animal itself, but also the parts, elements of the natural history around it. For example, California poppies and scrub jays, these species, both botanical and avian, both existed at the same time as Smilodon. We have these scrub jays, we have these birds up here mobbing this poor Smilodon. Here are some studies of canines. A wild canine. This is a young red fox, adolescent red fox. And then we have a pug puppy. Pug puppy, of course, is almost like artificial man-induced creature design. We have a adorable little dog that probably could not survive very well in the wild. Whereas here, this fox is incredibly adapted to survive in the wild. It can run really fast. It has a nice long snout. It can get lots of air, nice jaws to catch its prey. And this poor little guy, as cute as he is has a lot of hard times breathing, could not sustain extended chases, unfortunately. So his natural environment is on the lap of his human. All right. But here's an illustration from a child's book about Henny Penny, the story of Henny Penny. This is Foxy Loxy. But I used a lot of very natural approaches to this illustration. A lot of accurate anatomy in the fox, in the groundhog. Of course, then we have foxgloves and columbine and bluebirds, but a lot of humor. And all of this is creature design. I own these. These are my little seahorse skeletons here. This is the female. This is the male on this side. And this is a bookmark. Okay. For advertising, we've got my study of a crocodile and then a character I developed for Crocs. Here's a croc wearing Crocs. So they're fairly realistic crocodile, except real crocodiles never stand this way, nor do they look at you at the corner of the eyes in this sly a manner. Another greeting card, happy birthday card, a giant panda and a red panda. This was done in watercolor. So I used all kinds of different media from watercolor, markers, acrylics, and digital. Here we have another greeting card. This little kestrel is dressed to kill. And then some cartoon characters. This is the Bad Bird Club. These little guys have ray guns, so be good to your pet birds. Cockatiel and a budgie. All right, so here is creating a griffin of a sort from a science fiction, even paleo point of view. So remember the leopard and you remember that Protoceratops earlier on? Well, I blended those to get this sort of an animal, which is sort of like a griffin. And the interesting thing about Protoceratops, that dinosaur, is that when ancient peoples first uncovered those skulls, they actually thought that those were griffins. Griffin is a mythological animal that is basically half eagle and half lion, but they thought those were the skulls of griffins, and that's how the legend got started. This was in the Middle East. And so I kind of just went on that tact and decided, let's use a little bit of Protoceratops, let's use a little bit of feline, and create a science fiction griffin. And here are those pterosaurs, those griffins, in doing something here. Obviously, this is inspired by lion kills. Here's a study of that teasor based on observing young cougars at play. And all kinds of things you can do. So this design would be appropriate, say, for a digital production, like for Pixar or DreamWorks or some of the Disney productions. This one would be, again, you could use this for Disney or any 2D production. So it's a little more simplified than that. These are just playing around with a character, seeing how far I can go. And this is playing around with the Dr. Seuss character. I loved this character as a child, and I decided, well, let's compare it with real life. The closest animal I could come to in real life was probably a wildebeest or a hartebeest. So these are kind of my studies of those, and I put the Zans in this case in that same pose, and then played. So this guy got more realistic, and then the wildebeest got a little bit more exaggerated and sci-fi'd until I got to this really whacked out character suitable for 2D animation or 3D animation. And this is just playing around with Mrs. Jar Jar Binks and other characters from Star Wars. Here is another illustration from the Cthulhu Odyssey. There's Katuk, and they're basically he's basically at a tavern. Here's two characters. They're con artists. This is Plod, the white-tailed wildebeest, and Flang, the spiny anteater. All of these animals exist on our planet. There's Guernica gazelle, spider monkeys, wombats, and some pheasants, and some guinea fowl, and agoutis, and they're all part of the story here. I love drawing wildebeests because they're just weird and crazy anyway. And this is just a little character I came up with. This is Tiki wildebeest, and he's very, very happy because he's had too many yummy tiki drinks. And so he's seen the blowfish from the ceiling actually coming to life. He's a very happy animal. Here is a character from production Tales of Amalthea. And this is a bear-like character that's about the size of an Asian elephant. And all of this sort of design work goes into creating the digital characters that you see on the big screen, like in Star Wars or Jurassic Park. They're designed to this degree of detail. And this is all necessary so that they can be built digitally and rigged and animated. Here are those same animals in a production scene interacting with one another. Here is a close-up of the face. So this is a very realistic treatment. Again, that could be like a Star Wars level or Avatar level movie. But you can also have fun with this same character and do something like this. There he is, same animal, but for a totally different use, for a totally different production, and more of a humorous production. And you can do other things like make something that's totally insane, or have him go to an anime convention, or have him advertise a cereal, or whatever. It's the world's one is your oyster. So creature design covers a whole lot of styles and aesthetics. Here is another character from Amalthea. And just get rid of that. And this is a kind of a more noble hero character. He's sort of like a Roman legionnaire. These are some of the study sketches of him doing different things like calisthenics. He's a very powerful creature. He's about as tall as a giraffe. He has these horns that he can whack things with. He's got this long dinosaur tail he can whack things with. And he's got a weapon that he can whack things with. So he is a very, very tough guy. But you can even take him and play. This character is from the same production. He's one of my favorite ones. That's why I included him. I just like the colors and such. But he was inspired by a ancient ungulate hoofed mammal The Synthecaceras, that was an ancient pronghorn relative that had this interesting fork on its snout. And I just thought that was pretty cool. Here are some more of those characters from that adult coloring book doing their warrior things. And then you can even get into design aesthetics, like putting them into almost like a logo. This is done very commonly in classical illustration. It's just so fun to draw. Here is that flying, basically that flying greyhound, ex-Apollo creature. And the coloring book here is in color so you can see these characters. And you have to be able to, as a designer, to be able to turn the anatomy in all angles. So you can do it on its back, from looking downward, almost an animated sequence here, all kinds of things to keep in mind when you're a creature designer. Aesthetics, again, we've got these kind of catfish felines, and this was actually, I combined this for a book plate. Lots of uses. That same character, but a more friendly, animatable character, 2D. Okay, caricatures. This is really challenging. So not only do you have to design what the character looks like, let's say it's an animal, and then you give it a personality so that it does things, but what if there's a third layer, that this character is also a caricature of an actual person, an actual historical person. A great example is from the Jungle Book, Disney's Jungle Book. George Saunders, the actor George Saunders, he voiced Shere Khan, and he also provided the caricature of Shere Khan. So Shere Khan is both a tiger, but he's also a caricature of the actor who voiced him. And it's just a marvelous one. Disney is absolutely wonderful at doing this. And so I had an opportunity to do this as well. And I had a lot of fun with this because, for one thing, it's one of my favorite television shows. I started watching it when I was 6 years old in the 1960s, starting in 1966, and now you can see how old I am. And I think you guys will probably recognize it. Here we go, Dark Shadows. I love Dark Shadows. I wanted to grow up and marry Barnabas Collins, I think, when I was a little girl. Anyway, so here is the actors, and they're marvelous because they have great faces. Jonathan Frid has a great face, those cheekbones, and here we have Laura Parker, who played his wife, Angelique, who was an adorably evil witch, but she's just absolutely beautiful, huge blue eyes. And so that makes it fairly simpler to do caricatures when the actors, the actual people, have striking features. And so the job was, well, what if these were animals? What if there were just a few changes in the names of the characters, so that instead of Barnabas Collins, you have Barnabas Collie? What would that do? And the funny thing about this is that they still have to follow the same script. So if you're a dog, or if you're a horse, or whatever you are, how do you light candles? But you still have to do it. So that's kind of where the humor comes in. And so here is one of the illustrations. There's Barnabas Collie. So I had to try to preserve the elegance that Jonathan Frid brought to the role of the vampire Barnabas Collins. And we still had to be able to somewhat recognize him. He had very distinctive eyebrows and such. And then here is Angelique with those beautiful, huge eyes, and still doing her evilness, in this case, poking things with, making voodoo dolls and poking them with needles and spines. And then, of course, we have other characters that like to bring other characters behind walls and create mayhem and all kinds of scary things in big, scary houses in big, scary Maine, of course, where things happen. Seems like either the Pacific Northwest or Maine is where creepy things happen in the United States. And here's Barnabas Colley. You can see him better. I think he's gnawed on his stick while he was in his coffin. All right, so all kinds of variety. And again, the integration of duality, that is personality, often human personality in an animal body, or even if it's an imaginary animal, is the thing, to quote Disney. We want to do all of that to support this story, which is the big thing, again, to quote Disney. So we've got elephants. We learned how to draw elephants. Here's the structure of an elephant. And we do this in order to be able to design characters like this one, or the elephant from the planet Zoid, who he only has one eye, but he does have a ray gun. Or to an extreme, where the design almost starts to fall apart. Here's Elvis. He's almost, if I go any further, he would cease to look like an elephant. Here is just a really rough scribble, because I was inspired by a Dr. Seuss character, which was Rosie rides a red rhinoceros. And this is my version. They said that this particular Rosie is a rah-rah. This is just little sketches from my sketchbooks, just for, I don't know, Dragon Fox. This is Peter, not a cottontail. It's just weirdness. These weren't drawn from anybody, just for my own pleasure. Here is a little character, this is called Pygalion. These are all from various animation and entity features and things I worked on for the course of my years. When Pokemon Go became very popular, I wanted to think, well, what if Pokemon, the Pikachu was a real character? So I designed him sort of like this hapless chinchilla-esque type animal thing. You know, why are all these people trying to capture me with their iPhones? You know, he's kind of frazzled. Here is a very elaborate putt-putt course that takes place on another planet, all kinds of styles of characters. I'm half Floridian, and my roots are from the Panhandle near Pensacola and Panama City Beach. And as a child, we would go to Panama City Beach each summer and play in go to the boardwalks, and they had the incredible and really fun putt-putt courses. And I brought those memories with me when I did this particular illustration. Here's from that same production, which was called Atomic Soda Pop. These are some bookmarks. There's all kinds of point of purchase products and things that are apart from the production itself. You know, we can all buy Star Wars bed sheets, for example. That's just part of that sort of marketing stuff. Here are some animated studies for the animation of one of the characters. The same thing for these two characters. And for this character as well. These guys are friends. We have lots of adventures together. Some of the storyboards. And of course, you have to have beatniks. And of course, you have to have Space Tigress, just because you always have to have Space Tigress. These are some Moo-Maids. And of course, you have to have, you know, a UK import band. Okay, so I did these drawings about 5 years ago for a convention. It was an animation convention. It was also the 150th anniversary of the publication of Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland. And so I did some characters for them. Here's the griffin. I gave him a crossbill beak. And here's the mock turtle. And they are looking at, oops. This is a Jabberwocky, because it was also one of the new Star Wars movies was coming out. So here's a Jabberwocky. It's having a lot of fun. And then here is a poster for that convention. This is the actual Jabberwocky. There's Alice. Here's some of the slithery creatures from the book. Some more sketches of cats from my notebooks. Because here is a design for another production called Catscadia. Catscadia is basically a mythical Pacific Northwest. There aren't any people in it, but there are all plenty of animals doing stupid people things. And these cats, they run a little advertising agency, and they decided to create an easy to read logo. And of course, if you ask a cat to design a logo, they will do one starring themselves and make it too elaborate to be practical. But then of course, you can't tell cats what to do. This is Armand, this is Twinkle. And of course, since they are denizens of the Pacific Northwest, they drink lots of coffee. And we have volcanoes because we have volcanoes up here. These cats like to go to tiki bars, hang out in tiki bars when they're supposed to be working. From that same world, there's these various muses that are based on artists of art history, and they kind of inspire these cat art directors. These are some of the rough sketches. So this is Andy Narwhal, and this is his famous invention, the Nartini. All of these animals like to imbibe alcoholic beverages. There's the color version, Andy Narwhal. Here's Leopardo. That's his most famous work, the Pony Lisa. Here's some of his little inventions. Here is Miko Antelope. And of course, you have to have Van Gogh. He tends to eat his artworks. And we've got, this is my sketches of some swine, like warthogs and domestic sow. That's my little miniature horse. That's not a swine. I just wanted to draw a little miniature horse. And of course, we need to have, this is my rough. There is Picasso. That's the old guitar fish. And here's one of his famous abstract cubistic works. Some of my studies of horses. Here's a thoroughbred. Here's a Chesbosky's. Here's some more studies of horses. As I say, I love to draw horses. And some more. Here's a Chesbosky's. And then here's a very designed version of the Chesbosky's on, I call it just the horse on the hill. And this is Epona. Epona is the ancient Celtic goddess of the horse that the ancient Celts worshipped. That's my version. So she's got some humanesque and horse in there. And the word pony came from her name, Epona. And that is my production. So I should hand this hosting back over to you, August.
Well, thanks a lot, Terryl. That was a lot of fun. Let's go ahead and unmute and we can give a quick round of applause.